I had the good fortune of being in graduate school at a time when the United States federal government became interested in what are the effects of daycare. And they issued a number of contracts to a number of well-known scholars, one of them being a man named Yuri Brofenbrenner, and he invited me to participate in his preparing a report on this issue. Because of my heavy involvement, I ended up publishing a paper in 1978. And basically what we found is that for all the hemming and hawing and raising concerns about children being separated from their parents and daycare, there wasn't much evidence pro or con, quite frankly. And on top of that, there were many questions that hadn't been asked or answered. But it was the late 1970s. Feminism was on the march and becoming ever more ingrained in the culture. So the fact that we weren't saying there are risks or problems associated with daycare was taken as a green light, as everything's okay. Over the next 8 years, I became a scholar of the effects of daycare because I had the foundational knowledge, and more work started to emerge. And like many of my brethren, every time data came up, a study was published that showed some potentially bad news, I found a way, like all my brethren did, to explain it away. Oh, it was a small sample. Oh, they were just poor kids. Oh, they just asked parents questions. They didn't really observe the kids. And that over time became troubling to me because I found myself, the way I always describe it is, having to twist around like a pretzel to dismiss the unpleasant news, which wasn't really ideologically attractive to me and my whole field. And so I stopped doing that. And what I realized was, and I'm quoting myself here from a paper that was very controversial that I wrote in 1986, is that there was a slow, steady trickle of disconcerting evidence. And that evidence, on the one hand, seemed to indicate that kids who started in daycare in the first year of life, especially for about 20 or more hours a week, were more likely to look insecurely attached to their mothers at the time when they were about a year or year and a half old. There was separate evidence that said the same kind of early daycare seemed to be related to problematic functioning in 3 to 8-year-olds. And when I say problematic functioning, I can also call it externalizing behavior, but it really we're talking about is disobedience, noncompliance, aggression. And as I've come to realize in the way that my field reacted to it was, I had broken the 11th commandment of my field. Thou shalt not speak ill in any manner, shape, or form of daycare.
A gente sabe e a gente vê quando você vai buscar por pessoas que estudam essa questão de ser um benefício para a criança ela estar no lar, né, ela ser perseguida como uma pessoa que está contra a liberdade feminina.
What was so disconcerting was not that people disagreed with my reading of the evidence, but the discourse was not simply analytical, scientific, methodological, statistical. It became what we call in the business ad hominem, which was character assassination. I wanted mothers barefoot and pregnant in the kitchen. I was against daycare. I was, an anti-feminist. And what was crazy and really so disappointing was just a few years earlier, I had won an award for early career achievement because of my accomplishments. And in fact, some of the people who admired me back then now treated me like a pariah. And what I came to realize was the Academy was much more ideological than I had imagined. Because I can recall back in the heyday of the war, like in 1987, when I got a call from a graduate student in the University of Wisconsin who was in tears because she was showing evidence consistent with what I had hesitantly concluded. And she was told, if you publish those data, you'll never get your PhD. That's very Soviet. That's very communist. You either speak the party line or you end up in the gulag. Well, going to graduate school, spending a lot of time earning your PhD, but then not getting it because you haven't spoken the party line, That's an intellectual gulag. After this war started, more and more evidence started dribbling in, perfectly consistent with what I had intuited. Every scientist wants to be ahead of his time, or her time. Well, the trouble with being ahead of his or her time is, it's lonely.
Tem estudos que mostram, esses estudos do cortisol começaram a ser feitos a partir dos anos 2000, dosando cortisol na saliva de crianças que ficavam em tempo integral na creche. Todos nós temos produção de cortisol, é um hormônio naturalmente produzido pelas glândulas suprarrenais, que ficam acima dos rins. Só que o pico de produção, os níveis mais altos, são de manhã e vão caindo ao longo do dia. O que se observou nessas crianças? Que os níveis eram mais altos e ia aumentando ao longo do dia, à medida que a criança ficava na creche.
Em temas sensíveis como o cuidado infantil, conclusões que contrariam expectativas sociais tendem a gerar resistência, inclusive dentro da própria comunidade científica. O caso das creches se tornou um dos exemplos mais conhecidos desse tipo de conflito. E esse impacto do sistema de ensino e do cuidado infantil na mente das nossas crianças é um dos temas centrais da nossa nova produção, Pedagogia do Abandono. E Belsky, o professor emérito renomado mundialmente, é um dos nossos entrevistados. Neste documentário exclusivo para membros da Brasil Paralelo, você terá acesso à entrevista completa dele, além de depoimentos de outros especialistas, médicos e educadores que decidiram romper o silêncio. A produção investiga o que acontece quando os anos mais decisivos no desenvolvimento de uma criança são entregues a um sistema marcado por baixa qualidade e disputas ideológicas. Entenda como as ideias que dominam as salas de aula e as creches hoje foram planejadas e quais as consequências reais para as famílias brasileiras. Aproveite o plano mensal da Brasil Paralelo. Clique no link da descrição ou aponte a câmera do seu celular para o QR Code que está aqui na tela e assine a BP sem comprometer o limite do seu cartão de crédito. Ao virar membro, você não apenas acessa conteúdos de alta qualidade, mas também viabiliza que continuemos produzindo vídeos como este. Assine a Brasil Paralelo e nos ajude a continuar fazendo o trabalho que poucos têm coragem de fazer. Nós contamos com você. Muito obrigado e até breve.